my favorite color usually is, say, blue. And then you say, well, that's my favorite color too.
Yeah.
I go, great. And then I meet somebody else. I'm like, what's your favorite color? They say green. I'm like, well, that's my favorite color. And then orange, my favorite, yellow, purple. And then I've made these agreements with each person that I am what they are. And the reason we're like that is because we're really messed up in society. Because when we meet people, we say, what's the same about you?
Yeah.
We don't say, I'm a spiritual chiropractor.
My friends call me the real life Care Bear.
Talk it out. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome
to episode number 19 of Black Sheep Thinking's podcast. Yeah. I am Morgan Pierce.
And I'm Andrew Podfay.
We are two life coaches and best friends helping you understand the difference between your thinking, which you are not, and the truth of who you are, which you are.
Yes.
And how your life can be benefited from the understanding this. And we hope today we can really shine a light on a major issue of identity.
Identity. Yeah, which is exactly what you talk about in the start. Who you think you are. Yeah. Who you think you are is your identity.
It's true. How you construct yourself for the world.
Yep.
To see. And as our coach, Arizona, Andrew McKee says, the chief cause of suffering is not knowing the difference between who you are and who you think you are.
Yep.
And we thank him for that because that's been a real major understanding and the core of what we do. And identity for me, both personally and, I think we all, and Jim Carrey talks about it, and if you ever watch any of his awakening as he started to shift into this understanding himself, is, we start to construct ourselves for the world and try to be something for the world. And then for me and for many people, what happens is you try to have the perfect caricature of who you are.
Yep.
And then that part of you doesn't get what you want or gets judged or lets people down or whatever.
Yep.
And then you think, oh man, if the best part of me isn't getting out of life what I want, then what happens if they find out about the real turd burglar behind?
Yeah, like Ram Dass talks about it, like our astronaut suits, right? Like we build these astronaut suits and we shine them up and we make them really, 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 really pretty. And everybody's got to see how nice they are. Look how nice this thing is that I've created.
Yeah. It lets us down. And it's really hard for people that's the biggest part that people fight because they want to hold on to that for safety.
Yep.
And they want to use that to block and defend. And I love that Jim Carrey says you're going to have to make a choice. Either you're going to have to commit to that character you're pretending to be and to your grave, or kill that character and take a chance on being loved or not.
Yep.
And the funny part is, for everyone that's ever worked with us, that's learned how to get out of identity, they've recognized how easy it is to exist.
Yep.
There's an old saying in show biz, it's like, what character should I choose? And people say, well, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Which is great advice, but people don't understand often how.
Yeah.
They go into okay, but it's true.
Because they believe myself is this identity, this story that they've created.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that they've, like Ram Dass said and you brought up, it's like, or someone who's told you what you are, and you've taken these pieces, and we get rewarded for it. I mean, you learn to feed yourself. Yay, Morgan. You learn to get a good mark at school. Yay, please your teachers.
Yeah,
please.
Validation.
Yeah. And it starts to become this, safety concept. They're like, well, as long as I'm what everybody needs me to be, and this is my story.
Yep.
How can I walk away from that? And what happens is you start juggling these parts of your personality, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you get tired of it.
Yeah, and it becomes scary because you start to run up against the borders, right? There's the borders of your identity and who you think you are. And as you start to get to those outer edges of it, it gets scary because it's like, well, this is unknown. I've built this safe place for myself. I can't go out there because what if I do? I'll get hurt. I'll fall. I'll fail. I won't. People will see the real me and they won't love me. And the truth is, if you can get outside of the borders of your identity, once you push past that and see that what you are is so much more than this story that you've created.
Yeah, it's hard to be loved when you're holding a mask and they're like, why don't they love me? I'm like, well, they don't see the real you.
Yeah.
They're seeing a caricature. They're seeing a version of you that they can sense. We can sense in people. If you're ever around someone that you've been around people that they're full identity, and you're like, oh man, and you can see through the cracks.
Yep.
But they just, and you're like, and it's just not honest.
Yep.
But they think that they're doing, and the funny part is they're doing that because they think you'll like them more.
Yep.
And that's what we all do. That's what I did. I was like, oh, if I dress well, if I work hard, if I give more, then I'll be liked. And those were all parts of who I really was, but they were amplified.
Yep.
And because of that, it was unnatural for people to be like, oh, there's something there.
Yep. And for me, it was like if I don't go too hard, if I don't accomplish too much, if I don't get too many accomplishments in my life and become too arrogant, then people will like me because they won't see me as that arrogant, pompous person who's like, I can do anything I want to do and you can't stop me.
Right. Identity is really a tough thing for people to overcome if they're not really aware of what's there on the other side, because they think they have to try really hard.
Yep.
And everything in life is telling us on the outside to reinforce that and to build it.
Yep.
And putting it down is like, well, what if I work with a lot of successful business owners, but if I'm not working really, really hard and doing this, then like my business will fall apart. I'm like, actually, it'll be more fun. It'll be easier.
You get to enjoy what you're doing.
Success can feel like not trying. You'll be more trusted. You'll be more at ease. You'll be more human, which makes you more relatable.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot easier when people realize like, I didn't realize it could be this way. I could be so at ease with myself rather than trying to always hold up. I mean, it got so bad. I've seen it so bad with some people. I went to university with this guy. We were walking down the street towards the pub. Yeah. And another group was coming towards us. And he turned around and he goes, ignore the accent, hello, everybody. How are you? And he started going into like this accent. And I'm like, who? And he's like, that's how they met me, man. I was just trying an accent one night. And he had to hold on. For those people, he had to be in character. And I'm like, what a great example.
It really is.
It is.
It really is a great example of what.
People say all the time, and things reinforce it all the time. Like, I hear people say, like, well, I'm different in front of at work than I am at home. And the concept of, air quoting self-actualization, or what we would call the truth of who you are and being that, is that there's the same version of you that's consistent, that you're not shifting personalities to appease or to be liked. If you can't be the same version of you, what's going on there? Yeah. And you're trying to, and the issue is, like, if you look at it from a color place, and this is what happens, like, so instead of personalities, let's say we just said colors, and I said, my favorite color today, because sometimes it shifts just because I love color, but my favorite color usually is, say, blue. And then you say, well, that's my favorite color too. Yeah. I go, great. And then I meet somebody else. I'm like, what's your favorite color? They say green. I'm like, well, that's my favorite color. And then orange, my favorite, yellow, purple. And then I've made these agreements with each person that I am what they are. And the reason we're like that is because we're really messed up in society. Because when we meet people, we say, what's the same about you? Yeah. We don't say what's different and honor that the way we should, because what's different threatens our existence of our identity. Yeah. So we look for similarities, and then we're like, oh, I feel comfortable. But eventually, and this happens in relationships and everything, the real you comes out, say 7 months down the road, the real you comes out at work, and then all of a sudden people realize, whoa, you're not purple, you're blue. Yeah. And then you've kind of were fraudulent in your character, and then they will either disconnect from you or treat you differently, and that reinforces more that your identity is not enough, because you're like, it's not perfect enough. Yeah. They didn't accept the fake version of me. Like, oh. But you made these agreements. But the thing is, so people are so afraid if they're not like that, if they're just themselves, they're going to lose people. But they're not your people to keep. Yeah, I love the analogy that you have about the flags. Yeah, so when we're at festivals, there's this whole thing about wave your flags to say when you're in, because people come from all over the world to big festivals, and people, Canadian flag, and we'll go over and we'll meet them, and they're like, we're from what part of Canada, whatever. But the analogy of identity, this kind of thing of taking on is waving all the flags. Yeah. Someone comes over, it's like, oh, you're from Sweden? No. Why are you waving a flag from there? Because I'm lonely and I just want to be liked. It doesn't make sense. And people, again, it goes, the real people will find you. Some people who are not your color in the analogy, like blue, maybe they are purple. But if you came and said I'm blue, maybe they'll accept you and go, cool, you're part of who I am. Yeah. But if they're not going to accept you, that's great, because that creates space for the people who are alike, and it's so much easier, as we say, and I've heard in business, never lie, because it's easier to remember the truth. Yeah. Well, then be the truth of who you are. It's easier to be that, and then let those people find you. It's true, and it's so much. It's just that's really kind of the baseline of. Are you happy in life? Because think about the stress. How much stress did it cause you trying to create a part of you, and then be that? So much. I know, definitely, like through high school, I was like that guy that
hung out with every different clique.
Me too.
And I would like cycle through, and so you had to be somebody different for each group that you hung out with, right? Because
Chameleon,
you know, because these people are into like country music, and these people are into rock music, and these people are in the band, and these people are jocks, and so you're like trying to put on this different outfit for each person that you're hanging out with to try and be somebody different.
Especially with social media, I think that is even like a harder, and that's what we see on social media, is that people are trying to be something for the world because they want connection, but they're really getting validation, which I've recognized validation is really a microdose drug of the authentic version of connection. So they think that if they get validation, it will make them feel connected, but it doesn't last, and it doesn't satiate, and so they want more, always chasing the dragon of validation when really they want connection. But how can anyone connect with you when you're not showing up?
Yeah, when you're not even connected with yourself, right?
Oh yeah. And so, you know, you're in there's a lot of things that get in the way. Like, people don't feel enough. They don't feel worthy, and they're lonely. And we go back and we talked in the last thing about being connection, but people who think they're not enough realize there's nothing you're going to do to feel enough, and the fact that we know you're worthy because you're here in this experience. So don't try. And I think it's really sad, the way that, going back to Jim Carrey again, when he said that the real you have to be this character to your death. It made me really sad to think, we don't know there's anything after this. We only speak about what you experience, and so afterlife stuff isn't really our neck of the woods. But assuming there's only one experience, and there is only one experience of Morgan Pierce. At least this version of Morgan Pierce. And I'm sure there's other people out there like, wait, my name's Morgan Pierce. But being me, the only me, to not be me means the actual version of me never got a chance to be here. And that the world didn't get to experience that. And if you're listening, I want you to realize, like, the real you is so valuable to show up. We don't need another thirsty version of another person who needs validation and is willing to manipulate who they are for society. We need the real you to show up, and when you do that, you allow other people to do the same. It changes lives.
Absolutely.
And we need more people like that. That's what black sheep thinking is really about. Yeah, there's a lot of white sheep out there, but we're all kind of black sheep and feeling lost. And when we learn this language that we're sharing with you, this understanding, it's not just because we want to help you. We know when you shift, that we hear reports that people shift around them, and they trust to put down their identity.
It's true.
And they start to show up more authentically, and they start to show up more carefree.
And I would say that's, when Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world, that's really what he's talking about, right? You become that. When you become the best version of you and that real part of you, that truth of who you are, and you stop trying to play this part and this identity piece, then it allows other people to see that it's safe to do that for themselves too.
When I heard be the change, I thought it was like hold doors open, pick up garbage on the ground, kind of thing.
Like random acts of kindness.
I thought that made me a good person. But what it was is, those are good things, but it was really about the sense of being that people felt around me, that there was just me. And what you see is what you get. Because when someone puts up a wall, it's like almost talking and putting up a shield. It's like, why are you doing that? Well, if I'm putting up a shield, it's like a story that I think you're going to attack me. Well, if I'm putting up a mask, I'm either trying to win the relationship or defend. And I'm not, and it means I don't try. It's almost like a subliminal thing of saying, I don't trust the connection. And that's not the intent. I think the intent is, I'm trying to connect more. But that's not how most people perceive it. And so when you're trying to be something for the world, realize that you don't have to try so hard. I'll say to clients, like, if you have to try that hard to be this version of your person, then give it up. You're not that. But what they don't realize is if they give it up and stop trying, they don't trust that the real version of them will be the best version. They think they're going to be mean and judgmental, but they are. That's just more identity. That's just more psychology. That's more thinking. The moment
when you become the truth of who you are, there is no judgment. There is no meanness.
Exactly. And there's just you. It's like that's who you were at birth. And put down the programming, allow the operating system to guide you. And then all of a sudden, you'll see how things change for you because you're showing up energetically differently.
Well, it's true. When you watch little kids, like really, really young kids, before they've started to create this identity, how easily do they get along and they play and they find each other on a playground and they're best friends right away. They're just like, I want to see my best friend again. You're taking your kids home and they're like, can we go back? I want to see my best friend again.
We'll take it a step further. How easy it is for them to dance without embarrassment. How easy it is for them to be proud of a drawing that, by all senses of art, might not be high end, but they had such confidence in what they did. They don't care about judgment, and they just just do it for them, and they show up because they're experiencing life, and that aliveness in people allows other people to experience the same thing. And that's the power of squashing identity and being this place of unconditional love to yourself, and then through that to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, identity. We got time. Identity is a big one.
Identity is a big one. It's a lot. I mean, it's really, we always talk about how like almost everything comes back to that, to understanding that what you're battling with is your identity.
Yeah.
What you're trying to get through, it's the truth of who you are is trying to be seen through your identity, and that's kind of the sorrow that's like you talk about that, right? Like there's sadness in your spirit. The truth of who you are is mourning that you're not allowing it to shine through, right?
Yeah, that your thinking has almost convinced you. The pain you experience is that your spirit's mourning, that your brain has convinced you that you need to be something more than you already are, which is enough.
Yeah.
Like, go on a search and be something. Go do something to finally feel good about yourself. Well, okay, and then you go on this journey.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, it's not working.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we talked about that actually in my group, because one of the members of my group, she's traveled the world. She's traveled like 33 countries, and she's on the other side of the world right now. And the other members in the group are all, stayed home. They're still home. They've gone on vacations and stuff, but they've got their roots planted. But they're all looking at her going, oh, that's so amazing they get to travel. And she's like, oh, I think it's amazing that you guys have planted roots and stay home. And I'm like, so do you see what happens there is like this story of we just want it to be different than it is.
Yeah, not valuing with gratitude what we are.
Yeah.
I remember the other day I was talking to Nicole, and she was like, we were doing that thing in Toronto where they had all those 600 vendors.
Yeah.
They were all trying to sell, and we were walking around, and it was kind of in a position where she's really social. Everyone's striking up conversations with us. And it was taking a lot more time, and I was like, if we could just be like antisocial, we could get through this faster. But we're not like that. And then she's like, yeah, but I'm an introvert usually. I get forced into being outgoing. And I was like, oh, those labels, those are part of an identity piece. Like I'm this, I'm an empath, I'm that. No, you're not.
Yeah.
To be willing to kill the version of you think you are, and become what you need in the moment.
Yeah.
Because identity says I have to behave this way. You've seen me at parties, the center of attention with magic or just chatting, but you've also seen me sit off in the corner and just watch people.
Yep.
And what happens when I do that?
People are like, is he okay?
Yeah, what's wrong?
Morgan?
Is Morgan in bed? No, there's just a lot of energy in the room, and I don't have to force my personality into it, because if that was my identity, I thought I always had to be that.
Yep.
And the expectations of it.
Yep.
And you realize, like, oh, I don't have to be anything. I can just be me. I can be the real me and just decide in the moment what is required. But most people's identity is kind of made up for them at a young age.
Yep.
And as Steve Chandler wrote in his book Time Warriors, like, it's made up of insecurities, insults, and all sorts of things, fear. And so it is done being made up for us kind of in high school. And the best thing to do is to let it die.
Yep.
And just show up.
Yep.
Because everyone keeps saying, well, what do I need to do to get more love? I need to be different. I need to be this. I need to change. It's like, but no one ever asked the $1 million question, which is, how do I become more loving?
Yeah.
And if they ask that question, all the things they worry about disappear.
That's true.
And so but you can't do that when you're trying to be a certain way.
Yeah.
For the world, you're like, I can't do that. I'm like this.
Yeah. When you're hiding behind your mask.
Yeah, and all the labels like we always say, like, labels can describe how you are in a moment, but they shouldn't define you.
No.
When I met my stepdaughter, I have ADHD, and what means I can't pay attention? No,
not true.
Not true. It just means that there's certain things that you create hyper focus. There's other moments where you struggle, but when you understand what ADHD and the gift is, and you get past that part of your identity, like I had.
Yep.
I was non-medicated, I dealt with ADHD, and I did very well in school. But I also believe, because I had ADHD, it became part of my identity, and I thought, I'll never do well in school.
Yep.
Until someone taught me that, no.
Yeah, and how many times have we witnessed people in that same kind of idea where it's like, I have anxiety or I have depression.
Right, part
it's
of
like,
their
no,
identity.
you're human, you've experienced anxiety and you experience depression, because as we know now, anxiety is that fear of the unknown, the fear of the future we can't predict. Mm-hmm. And depression is that wallowing in the past and trying to will things to be different than they were and wishing things had changed.
The permanent.
And so every human experiences it, just some people attach to it for a little bit longer and then get labeled with, well, you have generalized anxiety disorder, you have depression, and then it becomes a part of their identity, and that's who they have to be now.
Right, and everywhere they go, they're like, oh, I can't do this, I have anxiety, or this is an issue, I have anxiety. It's like, okay, Do you though? Or yeah. And when we start to challenge those beliefs that they carry about who they think they are, and they realize, I remember Arizona telling me a story about a man that was really struggling. He was, as a young boy, they were traveling over a bridge, and the car fishtailed and they spun out. Everyone was fine, but for some reason, it terrified him.
Yeah.
And so he spent his whole life not going over bridges. And can you imagine in your life
having to reroute every
there's some things you can't even get to.
Yeah.
He was missing on family reunions and job opportunities because he
just couldn't drive over a bridge.
How are you going to get around our area? Like there's so many bridges.
So many.
I mean, even the smallest bridge you don't pay attention to because you're not afraid of it.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you're not getting to the other side of Kingston. You're not getting, and they're like, and so he helped him recognize that. He's like, "What are you afraid of?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, and he helped him realize it was his thinking and part of his story, and all he had to do was let go of it. And so one day he talked a lot about, what it was to, if he didn't have that story in his head, how would he feel? He was like, I would guess I would drive over bridges. It's like, yeah. So it's not actually the bridge you're afraid of; it's the story in your head. It's the story in your head that's tied to your identity of this boy that was
this horror movie that you've created. That every time you go over a bridge, this is what's going to occur.
And then one day he missed a meeting with them, and he's like, "Where is he?" And it turned out he drove like cross country, and he's like, "How did you do that?" He goes, I just drove over. I just did it. Right, I just did it. Because it was no longer, I just realized it was just a story in my head, and our brain reacts the same way to that story is actually the fear, which is the same way how people overcome childhood traumas, is realizing that you were hurt then, but you're not anymore, so you don't have to carry that with you as part of your identity, because as soon as you put that down, you have a chance to create from this spot moving forward.
Yeah.
Because the problem with your identity is that everything in your life is based off what you think you are and not what you think you could be.
Yeah. Yep.
Identity is really, we see it all the time. You see identity in the way people dress. You see identity, obviously, identity politics is a real hot topic right now.
Yep.
And again, what's better than wanting the world to see you a certain way is just showing up as you are and letting the world experience you.
Yep.
And where we're all, because in identity we think we need to be different or we need to be a certain way. But when we remove the way we create ourselves.
Yep.
Here's another reason it happens. Sometimes what happens is somebody hurts you, and then you start to build yourself a certain way to be like, you hurt me so bad, I'm going to ruin my life to prove how bad you hurt me. And that becomes your identity.
Yeah.
Like, take a second to reflect on any part of your life where you think you are a certain way.
Yeah.
That you've had to create a story about who you are. What if you didn't have a story about you and you could decide tomorrow to show up? And this is what we witnessed. That the moment you realize you're not tied to the story, then you get a chance to shift and change.
Yeah.
You get a chance to show up the way you want.
Yeah.
This is how people transform their lives, is by understanding that they're not tied to their past.
Yep, that's funny when you say about like the watch me destroy myself. That was exactly what I did. My parents split up when I was young. My dad wasn't in my life very much, and I felt so hurt by the way that unraveled that I destroyed my life and was like, look how hurt I am. I just wanted to prove to my parents how much they'd hurt me by just absolutely destroying myself.
Yeah, and I'm okay with sharing my story, but when we share our stories, we're not sharing it from a place of poor me. We're just sharing that we also have experiences that have been challenging, and that we don't, but I used to, before we understood this, before we met, I thought it was like, oh, here's this kid, and I felt in finance, I felt like I could never work with people who were well off because I came from a poor family.
Yeah.
I felt like I could never be proud of who I was because I was abandoned by, and that my name meant nothing.
And if you can just put that story down, you can realize that there's a part of you that can
heal and grow and
whatever
create
I want.
Yeah,
exactly.
You are not what you've been through, and you're also not what you think you are. And this is hard for people because did I tell the story about Santa Claus already? I think I did. If I haven't, I just been in university real quick. In university, we did an understanding, this little study about how people found out about Santa.
Yeah.
And when people found out the truth about Santa, about 50% of them were devastated they were lied to.
Yep.
And the other half just found out in a way like their big brother or internet or something. And I always think, man, for those people, and I was like that. I felt like my mom lied to me. There was no internet back then, so I was like 18 by the time I found out. I'm just kidding. I was like, but I was probably older than most kids are now. Like 11 or 12, and the kids are finding out younger. But I just remember I was so hurt, and then you think, wow, this is why it's hard to put down identity, because if you think it's upsetting to find out there's no such thing as something you believed in, and you figure that out, imagine when you find out there's no such thing as you.
Yeah.
And how hard it is to be like but all the things, but the things I went through mean something. If you give them meaning, if you attach yourself to them and you think you have to hold on to them to have a better story, and it just never works out that way. And then when you're holding that up, anything that goes against it will hurt you.
Yep.
You know, I'm a successful man, and then something happens, like you make a mistake in business, you're bankrupt, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I can't let people know, I'm embarrassed. Or the person that has a happy marriage, they get divorced, oh, I can't let people know, that's embarrassing. Because that's the thing with divorce and those big moments, losing a job, all that. People they don't think, oh no, I'm screwed. They think, what will people think?
What will people think of me?
And I thought the same thing when I was leaving a healthy career to go into coaching. I thought, what will people, and I remember talking to myself, I said, what would people think? What people? Who's so invested in you? You know, because the people will love you, they'll support you.
Yeah.
But it's not ever those people. It's the story, the projected story about your identity into someone else that they're like, it's just your own. It goes back to what we talked about before, you know, in the personal mind, and you know, being like, oh, they're all gonna laugh. They're all gonna laugh at you. Yeah. And so laugh with them, I guess.
Exactly. Laugh with them, because you realize that it's just their identity judging your identity.
Yeah.
And then you get to have a laugh.
And so that's today's lesson, really, is to take a look at the things you're attached to as part of your story and realize, they're not serving you, and they never are. Even if you think they are, they become a shield, they become something that's limiting you. If you think you need more education to do something, if you think that you're not enough, if you think that you have to be perfect, these are all parts of a sign of your identity. It's the costume you're wearing. And when you put that down and you free yourself from that story, now all of a sudden you have the flexibility in any situation to show up with what's needed from a place of love and understanding and service and gratitude and compassion, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the most powerful part of you, because that's not your identity, that's you. The real you. And then
lay your identity to rest and allow the truth of who you are to show up.
Let them see you. You deserve to be here and have this experience. You're worthy of it. And we want to meet the real you too. And it's made a big difference in our lives in just showing up authentically, because you don't practice authenticity. You have to practice saying it. I'm tongue-tied. You don't practice. Brené Brown said you have to practice authenticity, but that just folds in on itself. You just get to let go of what you're not, and what shows up is authentic. And so there's an understanding of identity. We hope that today offered you any insight. Do you have anything else you want to say about this?
No, I think that sounds pretty complete to me.
Well, for our episode it is. I'm really thankful that you're here with us. Thank you for being part of this worthy herd. We look forward to seeing you next time for our 20th episode, where we will throw a big production. We're going to hire a circus and elephants.
And if you want to see it, make sure you like and subscribe and share it with your friends so they can get to episode 20 with us too.
Yeah, we really appreciate you're here.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much.
Much love.
Peace.